Hello, civilized people. Tomorrow, one of the longest presidential campaign seasons of all time will finally come to an end. A presidential campaign lasting 721 days will finally and thankfully draw to a close. A campaign season which has been so rife with insanity that a candidate now has an official campaign garbage truck and has worked at McDonald's. The other, meanwhile, is lying about performances from musicians to get literally anybody to come to her events, and embracing the classic online talking point of everybody I disagree with is literally Hitler. Moreover, the insanity isn't restricted to just campaigns. This has been an election season so rife with strategic blunders, blatant manipulations, grievous errors of judgment, and misconduct by elections officials, as well as the Department of Justice, that the circuit courts and Supreme Court have basically been having to step in daily to repeatedly sort out issues that shouldn't actually be issues. So get ready to go to a Beyonce concert, only to find out that the only single ladies there have lots of cats, and that the only thing you will be listening to is Kamala Harris's hyena laugh. Get called into work at midnight because some madman just ordered a vinyl wrap on a garbage truck, and say a prayer for Peanut the squirrel and Fred the raccoon, who gave their lives to show the full extent of government overreach. As today, on the Goths podcast, we talk about the absolute state of the Trump and Harris campaigns on Election Day's Eve. So, Colton, how you doing?
It is all so tiresome.
It is all so tiresome, but it is so nice. It's almost over. So close to done.
Shout out to the Empires of Dust documentary where that line's from.
Ah, yes. But it's been, we haven't quite seen, the whole dick measuring thing like we thought we were going to see in the Republican primary back in 2016. And I mean, we thought that was crazy at the time. I think society as a whole. But look at where we are now. I mean, did you have any of this shit on your bingo card for the year? Did you have squirrel dies becomes a martyr for small government? Did you have I don't know, campaign garbage truck? Did you have presidential candidate working at McDonald's? Did you have presidential candidate getting booed at their own event because Beyonce didn't actually perform?
Well, this
Any of that?
this time I opted to not play bingo and instead be the announcer. And I feel like that's
Uh,
gone much better.
yeah, that I mean, I have to give credit to some people in this, but I guess we'll get to some of that shortly. But so I think at this point, given the polls, well, we'll get to the polls later, I suppose. But do you feel like there's been any signs of, you know, how this election is going to end,
No,
just based on
it's
general signs?
nope. I've seen I kind of stick my head everywhere where it doesn't belong. So, I've seen videos of Trump rallies where he says it's full and then it's not full. I've seen Kamala rallies be not full. I've seen rallies in person be full for both sides, so it's just like I have almost no accurate gauge.
Yeah, it's a bit weird. It is a bit strange,
Yeah,
but
and I don't particularly trust polls, anytime basically it involves Trump.
yeah, that we're actually going to have to touch on that. We've got a good bit of polling to discuss later on. But first off, I think we need to talk about the sheer fucking insanity coming from third party organizations and even governments at the moment. Like, it is stunning how blatant some of this is. and the fact that it's actually garnering media attention, which is not something that you would have expected historically. A lot of this usually gets swept under the rug to, give the appearance of keeping the house clean. But so you ready to dive into some of the elections complaints so far?
Oh boy, let's do
All right.
it.
So first one, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, turned away voters already in line to vote and closing down the voting center. Now, this is a Republican heavy district in a Democrat run state. And on this one, the FEC has actually gotten involved and forced that voting center to remain open like an additional 5 hours every day to make up for
Hmm.
this misguided decision. Like that's a crime. You can't just close down. If somebody is in line to vote, come hell or high water, you can't just turn them away unless they legally can't vote. And that's another matter entirely we've got to get into. But isn't that happy?
Certainly
Like,
something. I don't. I mean, the way you kind of framed it, I doubt it's from on high. I feel like this was probably just some local person that's like in charge of it, and was just like, nope.
I'm not sure who gave the order for it, but that decision came down and the FEC laid the smackdown on them. Which, what I find humorous is that most media sources are just reporting that Republicans are claiming that this happened. They aren't reporting that the FEC actually sided with them and the local elections office had to, make changes to bring themselves into compliance. So, yeah, that was a thing that happened. Anyway, the first of the cases where the Supreme Court has gotten involved. Several counties in Pennsylvania essentially decided that they were going to put out more drop boxes for ballots. And, well, the Supreme Court smacked the shit out of them. The Supreme Court basically said that, look, you're an elections office. You don't have the authority to do that. This, the state legislature gets to tell you what you do, and you do not have the ability to act beyond that. And that case was actually brought by Republicans, and they won that. Had you heard about that one at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was actually kind of a big one. The Supreme Court apparently convened on a Friday night and sided with the Republicans. I don't think I think there was only one Supreme Court justice in objection in that one.
Well, nowadays the Supreme Court siding with Republicans is not that surprising.
No, but I mean all of them, but one siding with Republicans is shocking.
I think it's more surprising that they showed up to work.
Well, the, given the state of elections in the country, it's kind of special. Next up, we have the big one, probably the most egregious breach of election integrity that I think is even possible. It's time to talk about Colorado, Colton.
Oh boy, what'd they do now?
So, the Secretary of State learned that default passwords and partially updated passwords for all voting machines in the state had accidentally been placed on a hidden tab on the Secretary of State's website that could be accessed by anyone. They learned this when the Colorado Republican Party brought it to their attention. The Secretary of State did not, in fact, take this down and instead opened an investigation, so it's left up. Furthermore, they did not inform the heads of the local county election offices. 1 week later, it came to the attention of state media, of various news stations within Colorado, who have since interviewed the Secretary of State And as of the time of the interview, which I watched, no additional instructions had been provided to local election offices. Now, you might be wondering what this means. Well, it means that any state which is using the same voting machines as Colorado and had not yet changed the passwords of their machines had the passwords for their machines leak in their entirety, meaning that someone could connect with them remotely and make adjustments until such a time as those passwords were changed. And if they changed something, the people behind it might not know. And I would like to point out in this, and what I find quite humorous, is that this is the same Colorado Secretary of State who lost her case in the Supreme Court trying to have Trump removed from the ballot due to insurrection. Would also like to point out that the way in which the situation was handled by her was, in fact, a violation of FEC guidelines. And a violation that generally carries with it a sentence of prison time. So, if people didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have standards at all. That is just fucking staggering. Like, to put this into perspective, if, like, what is it in Nevada, somebody that's going out and registering a voter, if they lose that form and somebody makes use of it, the person who registered that person to vote can face something like a $2,000 fine. And this is staggering. This threatens integrity not only in Colorado but in every well, I don't know exactly which states use what machines, but definitely in multiple states.
Only I
It
could
is
be so
mind-boggling.
grossly incompetent at my job.
I know. Apparently, you don't just have to fail upwards to work your way up in the campaign advisement business and in the party structures themselves. But apparently, you can do it in politics too. It works for the whole industry.
I mean, who's that lady from Georgia that keeps running? Is it like Stacey Abrams or something?
Stacey Abrams and Beto O'Rourke, they can't win a race. Not really. And yet, for some reason, they're just perennial favorites. Oh, they'll win this time.
Uh,
They're darlings of the party.
I don't get it.
Ah, yes.
I feel like you should get it max, like two chances. Like one was maybe a fluke, and the other one's like, all right, you just can't win.
Yeah. All right. So those are the state government problems. Now we're going to get into some that are caused by third party organizations. And one of these is a hell of a doozy, man. One of these is a hell of a doozy. It's not the FEC getting involved, but the situation has, but them playing in politics has exposed them a lot. But the first one, a third party organization known as Field and Media Corps fraudulently registered 16,000 people in the state of Pennsylvania. This organization is headed by an elected official who is a Democrat in the state of Arizona. They are now under investigation pretty heavily by the FEC.
Mm.
Uh,
How do they fraudulently register people?
they just made shit up.
Oh, like it's just
They,
fake registrations?
I don't know the full scale of it. Not a lot of it has come out. But in the same way that, if I registered you to vote, like a certain period before an election, then you would be unable to vote in that election. Or this person didn't want to register to vote, but they registered them to vote anyway.
Mm.
Things like that. And it begs, just registering. Well, I mean, there's a lot of questions there and what their end goal was. Let's leave it at that. There's a lot of questions that can be asked. So, also, that's a hell of a lot of fines, man. That is
Hmm.
a hell of a lot of fines. I mean, just for shits and giggles. If, I mean, again, this is a third party organization. These groups have money, but, it's only so much. But if those fines are the same thing as it was with what we've dealt with in Nevada, that would be a $32 million fine. And where it was done with intent, that's a felony.
Well,
You don't, that's obviously not an accident when you're doing it with that many.
well, it depends on if the Democrat machine backs them up. If they do, then it's not a crime. It's only a crime for poor people.
Mm, that one's hard because that's an FEC violation. The FEC doesn't really get the chance to pick and choose because it's governed by
Yeah, but
an
if
equal number of both parties.
yeah, but if someone else pays the fine, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so somebody else pays the fine,
Yeah.
but whoever's over that, if they were aware, would certainly face prison time because there is obvious intent.
We'll have to do a follow
Next,
up on that.
next up, we have Elon's petition. Care to? I know you're familiar with it. Care to explain what that was?
So, basically, it was just a huge data gathering operation for making sure they have updated Republican information, and their petition is the most basic petition I've ever seen, and it's just saying registered voters who agree with the First and Second Amendment. That's basically all of the petition language. And then, they want your first name, last name, where are you registered to vote so they can check the voter rolls, and then your phone number to confirm that. And then
Hmm.
on top of that, you can refer people to sign up, and that's what the phone number is also for. So every person, every registered voter that you get to sign up, and I think it was only in the swing states, right, Robert?
I believe so. Yes.
Only in the swing states, you would get $47 per person. Like you could make a living off of like doing this.
And if you if you signed up yourself, you got paid.
Only if
And
you
if you
lived in
referred,
Pennsylvania.
oh, okay, all right. But yeah, like that is a wonderful, wonderful method of gathering data. And a lawsuit has been filed against Elon, claiming that it's election bribery. Unfortunately, to the people filing this, that is not the case. It is not against the law to pay someone to sign a petition. It's against the law to pay somebody to sign a ballot initiative. And those are vastly different things. A ballot initiative is something where you collect signatures. If you get enough signatures, it winds up being voted on in an election where citizens actually vote to implement a law or a constitutional change.
And
This has nothing to do with that.
those are the things that where you go vote. Those are the yes or no questions. That's a ballot initiative that
Yes.
passed. Um, but also in that, I think it's really funny how easy it was to see that lawsuit. Like I guess they were trying to like, starve them of money or something. But Elon is literally the richest man in the world.
Kind of.
No, not kind of. He is,
Oh, he is.
and so didn't work. And also, like they must have a huge budget that pack because again, they're sending out $47 to everybody that gets referrals, and then if you live in Pennsylvania, it's $100 per person, and
Yes.
then $100 for you to like sign up yourself. Like they are. This is the greatest Republican outreach of outsourcing information gathering that I have seen in the modern era. And this is like
Uh,
my bread and butter of where I work in politics.
this, I'm not even going to say Republican. I'm going to say it is the greatest data collection operation in American political history
Yeah.
since the advent of voter registration, where, all of a sudden people had to register.
And
And
just
that but you had data on who would, be more inclined to vote because they bothered to get themselves registered to vote.
and again, this is only possible through literally the richest man in the world bankrolling this.
Yes,
And
this is
that,
incredibly expensive.
I mean, we can go even further into this because we used to kind of do this,
Yeah,
in data operations where I think before to get like man hours per data individual, right? It
yeah,
would cost the organizations we worked for, like, in the beginning, like $17 or $18 per person, and then it was getting upwards towards like 28 when, like, after the middle of COVID era, right? And then Elon now
yeah.
has jump started that, where he is outsourcing it, so now not only super PACs, but your average Joe can go sit out front of a Safeway and ask people to sign a petition.
It's
And really,
like
he can
this
make a
is a
wage from it
genius.
for a month. He can make a
This
wage
is
from it.
this is utter genius. But it's not illegal. It is in fact perfectly legal. In fact, you can actually correct in Pennsylvania. It is illegal to pay somebody per registration, but that's not the case in all states. So if I said that's just broadly illegal, I spoke erroneously. In California and a few other states, you can be paid to register voters per registration.
And if you want to look
So
that
I,
up for yourself, I believe those are called bounty laws.
yes, you have bounty laws. That is correct. It is bounty laws. But yes, ready for the next organization, Colton?
I'm ready.
NBC, the news organization. So Kamala Harris appeared a couple nights ago on Saturday Night Live, and that's perfectly fine. Uh, but it carried with it a problem. Networks are obligated to offer similar time blocks to presidential candidates because it is valuable. It is you're basically giving a candidate airtime, and that can be construed as a campaign donation unless you give the other candidate equal airtime. So in this case, they gave Kamala Harris free airtime on Saturday Night Live. Well, an FEC official confronted NBC, highlighting that this was a breach of FEC guidelines and a blatant attempt to do so late in the race that they couldn't actually fit Trump in. However, as of today, that matter was resolved, literally under 24 hours, with NBC being forced to sacrifice ad revenue and give Trump airtime during both a NASCAR race and during Sunday Night Football, uh, thus avoiding a rather hefty fine from the FEC, as her airtime would be considered a campaign donation. They are capped in what they can donate, and anything over than that is considered an unlawful donation. So,
I think the cap is
fun,
$5,000, right?
somewhere in there. It depends on what entity of the campaign you're donating to. There are some campaign entities where you can donate up to like 120 some thousand, but that's a very specific type of campaign entity.
Well, I think as
I believe,
as she was there like in person, it would definitely be towards directly her.
yes. But anyway, that has been resolved. But like we've said before, that we like the FEC, they generally sort shit out quickly. They sorted something out that happened on Saturday before Sunday. On Saturday Night Live, they had it sorted out before, you know, noon the next day. So credit where it's due. They're actually good at that sort of thing. And next up, we have CBS, Colton. So CBS is facing a 10 billion, yes, that's billion with a B, dollar lawsuit from the Trump campaign due to the interview on 60 Minutes with Kamala Harris. The interview has become somewhat notorious as it basically played out as most interviews do for Harris, who, let's just say she's not a great public speaker. Essentially, in the post credits, steps were taken to, again, to speak candidly, make Harris not look like a total moron. So, in some cases, the answers she gave to questions were replaced with answers to other questions. That said, the advertisement for the show had the original footage, making it abundantly obvious that edits were made. While this was done seemingly for the benefit of the Harris campaign, it should come as no shock that, you know, this could be a campaign violation. So while the Trump campaign is suing out of the state of Texas over laws regarding dishonest conduct in the operations of a business, the FEC is also looking into this instance as a possible campaign contribution to the Harris campaign. Oh
You
boy.
you gotta kind of wonder, did Trump get some appointees in the FEC that just got overlooked or something?
The FEC's always been kind of hard ass like this.
I love it.
Yeah. So if this goes through, they're essentially going to consider an hour-long interview with Harris as a campaign contribution. Now, CBS has tried to mitigate this already by saying, hey, look, we offer to do the same interview for Trump, but Trump can also, in this, cite that Speaker Johnson went on this news network and had his statements edited to make him look like a total moron. So, yeah, there are questions, you know, lots of questions.
And we'll have to do a follow-up on this.
This one, I get the feeling this will take years to resolve
I
because
hate
this will
those.
likely go to court. This will likely go to court and be fought out. Because, at least in the case of the Trump lawsuit against them, he is demanding a jury trial
In Texas?
in Texas.
Well, by all means.
Yep. Uh, I think we know how this ends.
He's trying to do the same exact treatment that he got in Brooklyn.
Kind of.
If he was smarter than he probably should have done it in like Florida.
I don't know which jurisdiction in Texas he's suing in, but it shouldn't be bad for him either way. Next up, probably this is probably the biggest one. Well, this is the biggest one as far as financial implications. And it's not just one organization, it's a set of organizations. It is Meta, otherwise, Facebook, Google, TikTok, and Snapchat. And this isn't anything directly related to election involvement, but in displaying bias, well, they have opened themselves up a lot. So, Meta, Google, TikTok, and Snapchat are now open to being sued over content. Given displays of bias, much of it in a political nature, these four entities can now be sued for the content on their websites as if they were publishers rather than platforms. Those protections have been stripped from them. While this is likely to go even further to the High Court, the Supreme Court in this instance, uh, this is likely to play absolute hell with the social media landscape. And probably once this gets a bit more media attention, absolutely devastate the values of those companies.
I'm not a fan of that at all. I that just it's going to lead to more censorship and yeah, I'm not
It,
a fan
it,
of
w-
that.
it will lead to more censorship. It will also lead to other companies that operate as platforms rather than publishers being able to more actively compete.
I don't care about that. I think the big ones are already set and they live and die by their own regulations. Kind of like how Tumblr killed itself. Like it's possible for these things to die, but I I just do not like the idea of someone else being held responsible for someone else's postings or speech. I don't like that at all. That's like
Yes,
it's the same thing for me as punishing the parents of like school shooters. I do not like it.
yes, that's the thing. That I agree with that. However, in the same way that a media outlet, in the same way that basically Google, TikTok, all these organizations had those protections. Those protections still exist for a lot of companies. But because they have taken such a heavy hand with censorship, they can no longer be seen as platforms because they are overly moderating. As such, now they are seen as publishers. And where they are publishers, this is like if this pans out as it normally would, this is a situation where if you go on and I don't know, some jackass just wants to screw with them and starts posting illegal content on them and somebody sees it, that person, somebody that sees it, can then report it and sue these companies for it for having seen it because it is not meant to be on there. They're not allowed to have it on there. So ultimately, I think that this leads to the death of those organizations. I think Google is now fortunate to have had YouTube ordered to systematically be separated from Google because it doesn't fall into the same category. Like, not anymore. YouTube is not on the list
I mean, what
because
even gets
YouTube is
posted on Google besides like it's just a link aggregator? I don't
basically,
understand like how could
but
Google get caught up in this if it's not YouTube?
Google Docs.
No.
I don't know exactly, but that's what comes to mind.
I've never
But
heard of
ultimately,
someone's Google Docs being moderated and people.
I know. But basically, because they have been so heavy-handed in moderation, when it is not their job to moderate, their job is to be a platform that, well, they overstep the bounds of what they could do and still get those protections. And I am fine with them being stripped of it unless they alter back to being a publisher or to being a platform rather than a publisher. And that, I think that's a long time coming because I think that's what's given Google and all these companies. Actually, in the case of Google, it was known because it was one of the big things was that like during a campaign season, if you looked up Trump, it automatically favored showing negative articles. And if you looked up Kamala, it automatically showed favoring positive articles, things like that in the news.
Again, I'm not a fan of this. I do not like this at all. I do not care if it's my side having vengeance or whatever. I don't care. I do not like it. If they were gonna do this, I'd rather them just levy massive fines in the tune of like $30 billion a month until you don't do this anymore.
Well, yes.
I would rather that
Uh,
than literally like
well,
in
well, the
my
thing
point
is,
of view, this is like changing First Amendment laws. I do not like it.
these are no different laws than impact the media. They are now governed by the same laws that govern CNN and Fox. They are publishers, which is what they've been acting like.
Yeah, but not really. Like you can't just submit an opinion article to Fox and have it show up on their page. It has to be approved and you have to be hired and paid. It's not the same.
As, yeah, essentially, I think this is going to fundamentally change how those companies have to operate. I don't think they can do what they've been doing. I don't think it's possible for them to continue doing it. Not if they're going to be held to the same guidelines. I don't think it's possible for, people to discretionarily post what they like anymore
Again, I don't
once
like it.
this is all
Anyways,
settled.
we could just
See,
move
I'm
on.
I'm I'm fine with this one. But anyway, now it's time to the one that is the most confusing out of all of these. We're done with third-party organizations. It's time to look at the man. And by that I mean the federal government. So, the state of Virginia discovered 1,500 non citizens registered to vote within the state. The governor, Glenn Youngkin, ordered that the 1,500 ineligible voters be removed from the voter rolls. In response, the head of the Department of Justice, Merrick Garland, demanded that Virginia leave them on the voter rolls. This has since gone to the Supreme Court, and they have intervened and indicated that yes, in fact, Virginia is allowed to enforce their own laws. But this begs a bigger question, Colton. Why the hell would the federal government want illegal immigrants on the voter rolls?
Well, there's the nefarious argument, and then there's the argument that they do to try to save face. You know, I mean, do you? So the nefarious one is obviously, haha, illegals voting in our elections and demographics is destiny. That's why we're importing all these people. And then the other argument is some states allow people that are not citizens to vote in local elections, but there's no separate ballots for them, and they end up voting in federal ones anyways.
This is true. Virginia is not one of those states.
Yeah, so there's no point in that in Virginia, but some states do allow that.
Yeah. Some states, I know Maryland has certain jurisdictions, local jurisdictions where non citizens can vote, where it's like areas that are almost entirely expats. So things of that nature, where they are semi permanent expats. But anyway, yeah, like, you know, Colton, you know, I'm a bit dumbfounded in this one. For the last, few years, there's been a lot of doubt amongst Republicans whether elections are actually conducted fairly. And it seems like if you are facing those kinds of questions, well, if you don't want to be accused of nefarious things, why do you make it look like you're doing nefarious stuff? I mean, that's how it looks, I think.
I mean, maybe just the mask is off at this point.
I mean, we're starting to see some of that. And we are starting to see some election desperation. But moving along. So, next up, just some general questions on the state of the race is who the candidates are surrounding themselves with. And at this point, it's no secret that, you know, Kamala Harris, her campaign has been utilizing a lot of celebrities. I mean, she got like the cast of the Avengers to endorse her and things of that nature. The running joke is that the Democratic Party is starting to look like a Diddy party from all the rappers and pop stars that are there. But the one thing that I've noticed a distinct absence of is a lot of politicians. Have you noticed that?
No, not particularly. I
Like,
also
she
wasn't
doesn't.
looking for it.
uh, I mean, she's had Obama out speaking for her a bit. She's had Michelle out speaking for her a bit. She's had Bill Clinton out speaking for her. And the last time he spoke, he basically said the economy was better under Trump. So I'm not sure. Just because the economy was better under Trump doesn't mean you have to vote for Trump, is basically a paraphrased Bill Clinton quote. Uh, it's getting a bit silly. But she seems like she's relying on, very heavily relying on celebrity endorsements, which I don't think that'll carry too much weight.
No, it never has.
Meanwhile, Trump has his share of endorsements, but he seems to have sort of developed an inner circle of sorts of politicians who he is taking advice from and working with. You obviously have Vance and Kennedy, but Tulsi Gabbard appears to be playing more of a role than I was expecting.
Did you see the
Thoughts?
big funny one today?
No, I didn't.
Oh, this is gonna make you laugh. This is gonna be a hit, clippable moment.
Oh, what is it?
Alex Jones is press secretary.
Wait, what? Alex Jones is press secretary. Oh my God. That would be admittedly hilarious.
It literally has been. There's been articles that Don Jr., who you know is pretty involved now in making these personnel decisions,
Oh God.
he's been considering it for over a year.
That would be hilarious. Oh my God. I can't tell what like he's kind of like Musk. He jokes around a lot. But yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, look at the chat.
That would be funny as hell. That would be absolutely funny as hell. The global meltdown over an Alex Jones press secretary would be legend. Uh
He literally
that
calls
would
them
be
like demon worshippers to their face.
that is that is priceless. So certainly Don Jr. appears to be taking more of a role. Kennedy, um, Gabbard, and apparently the something to well, a lot of younger people got heavily involved or started taking more interest in politics in 2016. Excuse me, 2012. And that was because of a certain elderly man from Texas named Ron Paul. Ron Paul is, something of a legend. He, as politicians go, he really did stick to his guns. He was very forthright in what he believed, and he never really backed down from it. And credit where it's due on that. Whether you love Paul or hate Paul, a lot of people respect him. He is basically the patron saint of libertarians, not the party, even though he has run as a presidential candidate in the Libertarian Party before. But Ron Paul is in the eyes of a lot of libertarians and even a lot of, pro-gun Democrats, kind of a legend, and he's very well liked. I mean, I know a lot of Democrats in Kentucky, and hell, they vote for Rand Paul just because he takes so much after his father. And as it turns out, the Department of Government Efficiency, which is supposedly being headed by Musk, is now going to include Ron Paul. Colton, how many libertarians do you think died of shock the moment that they heard that Paul was going to have a place in the Trump administration?
Has he actually officially accepted that?
Yes.
I thought it was just a tweet where Ron Paul was like, "This Department of Government Efficiency sounds real interesting," and then Elon Musk just tweeted back, "You're hired."
To my understanding, it is a thing that is going to happen.
Mm.
It is a thing that is going to happen. Whether, he comes in a full-time role, advisor. I mean, Ron Paul was a guy who the U.S. gave a gift to a foreign dignitary, and he opposed it. It only cost a few $100s, but he opposed it because why is the federal government buying a gift for a foreign dignitary? They should be spending that money on something important to the American people, not a foreign dignitary. Uh, he was very staunchly, very much a small government guy. And my God,
Well,
the man's a legend.
if it's true, then I hope he could provide a lot of expertise for Musk, so Musk doesn't just blatantly fire 50% of all federal employees at
I mean,
random.
I mean, I'd be okay with that.
I mean, it's a bit more nuanced than that. I mean, that
Well,
might be the
yes.
end result, but you can't just fire them at, and say, sorry, we only hire lucky people. Like, you can't do that. Like,
Yeah, I
you
do.
gotta pick and choose and see which departments are, like, worth keeping. Like, there are 12 different departments and different heads that are only welfare, and they cover the same kind of welfare and entitlements programs. You can probably only have one of those departments, and now you just got rid of 11/12, of that.
Yeah, yeah. You have, well, I think Ron Paul was a huge pickup, really. I honestly think Ron Paul was a huge pickup just because now all of a sudden libertarians who don't like Trump, well, they've got a choice for Ron Paul. And the man is genuinely loved in that wing of party politics. Just because before Trump, he was probably the most genuine politician to have ever run. Like Trump just says what's on his mind. Paul kind of does the same, but he's just not as crass, I would say, as Trump.
Mhm.
So that's kind of awesome. It's nice to see, him come out of retirement. Although I do think it's kind of funny that the Department of Government Efficiency is apparently going to include a guy to end the Federal Reserve.
We can only dream.
We can only dream. True enough. But yeah, Trump seems to be surrounding himself by, whether you agree with them or not, people that seem to have a strong degree of talent. Whether you find that talent useful or not, he's at least finding people that seem to have talent or experience. And strangely enough, two of the most high profile ones are Democrats. Though I believe Tulsi Gabbard actually formally changed over to Republican recently.
Yeah, she
But
did.
Kennedy, but Kennedy, I believe, is still very much a Democrat. Or he might have switched to independent given his presidential run. But still. So next up, current events. Have you noticed any current events that have dramatically impacted the race
No, I mean,
or
there
the
was a
benefit of
lot
either
that
candidate?
happened that people thought would dramatically impact the race, but it turns out nothing. I mean, people already have their minds made up.
I do think that there have been some things that are dramatically impacting the race. Like whether it changes anybody's mind or not, the Joe Biden garbage comment, I do believe energizes Republicans.
Yeah,
I
but
do believe it
it's a
energizes
dual
Republicans.
garbage comment. You can't just mention one side without the other garbage.
Right, go for it.
Well, the comedian calling Puerto Rico the island garbage.
Yes, yes,
There are a lot of Puerto Ricans in the Northeast.
yes, and that has also been largely seen to fall flat on its face.
Same with the other garbage comment. That's what I'm saying. It was
Yeah,
big
it's not
news
meant.
for 2 days, and then
Neither,
we
ne-
moved on.
neither of them. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm
That's what
saying
I'm
is
saying.
neither of them impacted urge to vote. Neither of them impacted who people would vote for. But the Biden calling Trump supporters garbage made them more likely to go to the polls. We have not seen the same thing come of the Puerto Rican thing. The next one that I believe that has happened, well, that has happened, which is showing sort of a something of a backfire to it, was Harris's interview with Anderson Cooper and her subsequent change in rhetoric after the Fox News interview, which seems to have been off-putting to a lot of people. there are very few undecided people at this point. Very few. Like 3% would be very generous. And saying Trump is literally Hitler or Trump is a fascist is not carrying water. Uh, this was actually polled in Pennsylvania as well as another state. And it was generally viewed, even amongst Democrats, that it made Harris look weaker. And amongst undecided voters, it was basically panned universally. So I do think that what undecided voters there were, I think her rhetoric has sort of turned them off. Thoughts?
Um, I mean, once again, I don't think this has changed anything. If they weren't gonna vote for her, then they were probably not gonna vote for Trump either, and they're probably just gonna sit it out.
Yes. The that's actually something I agree with Franklin's on, is that at this point, it's not so much your independent voters, it's not so much whether who they vote for, but if they vote, and if they do vote, who do they vote for? You've got a bunch of people that just dislike both of them deeply for valid reasons. And yeah, and I would be remiss to say it, but we have to bring up Peanut Man.
Go for it.
We have to bring up the squirrel. As crazy as this is, and I never thought this would be, something that would lend any, oh God, I could never have imagined something like this having the ability to impact a presidential race. It's just so silly in my eyes. It's tragic, but silly that this would impact a presidential election. But in the state of New York, a fellow who did videos on YouTube, he lived well outside of the city, um, essentially fostered and made pets of a raccoon and a squirrel. The raccoon's name was Fred. The squirrel's name was Peanut. And, well, a literal Karen, yes, her name was Karen, in fact, called to report that this person illegally had a squirrel in the state of New York. And so what followed was that the state of New York launched a 5-hour raid on the home of this squirrel's owner and confiscated the squirrel and raccoon on the grounds that his home was not a environment conducive for a squirrel to live. And naturally, obviously, we're, you know, if that wasn't conducive, and you might expect them to move the animals to somewhere where they could be, you know, live in a conducive environment. No, the state of New York just killed them. So this guy lost two of his pets, and the state of New York proved that yes, they are willing to, get a warrant to get into your house to kill your pets. Because it clearly wasn't for animal welfare if they just killed the animals. So it wasn't like they were sick or anything. But that's sort of become a rallying cry amongst Republicans who view it as just another big example of government overreach. And it does beg the question of why the government needs the excess funding, needs the funding to be able to conduct a 5-hour raid over a squirrel and a raccoon that are kept as pets. Thoughts, Colton?
This is retarded, and I don't think it affects the election at all. I mean,
Uh,
it's
cons-
very sad and a very sad moment, and people are gonna say fuck New York and fuck New York. That's correct. But I don't think anybody's I don't think anybody that's not outside of a political, already cheering for anything politics wise is going to connect this to the election or to Biden or to Trump or to Harris or to Trump. I think this is largely just a sad fluff piece that has no bearing on get out to vote efforts or on a percentage of people coming out to vote that weren't already going to go vote, and now they're just going to have meme chants like how in 2016 they were dicks out for Harambe for Trump. Now it's dicks out for peanuts on Trump.
well, yes.
They were already going to
Part of
vote.
the reason why I say it is because, and why I think it might have some impact is that the owner has a massive following on social media.
Yeah.
So I think that could have some impact. What that impact is, I don't know, and it might be minor, but given the slim margins in some of these races, who knows?
Well, is the owner saying go vote for Trump so that they don't kill my next squirrel? If so, then it
Uh,
does. Then no.
I, I've not followed enough of it, but apparent. I don't know exactly the full extent of what he is doing in response to this, but yeah, this seems like the kind of thing where if people look it up at this point, you're basically finding the
You're
right
finding the
wing's take on
equivalent.
it.
You're finding the equivalent of Harambe jokes.
You are sort of. I don't really know. It's kind of a weird one.
I would be very surprised. Like I said, it's gonna be a meme thing where people that were already voting are just gonna be like, "I'm voting for Peanut Man," and that's it.
For what it's worth, even Musk has tweeted in regards to it, and that's a huge number of people to look into it.
To be fair,
As
Musk tweets at literally everything.
he does. I mean, he is literally the tweeter in chief
I
or
mean,
the
have you
Xer in chief.
seen like he mentions any sort of stock at all and it goes up the next day? He could be just having the most masterful pump and dump stock scams or crypto scams.
This is true. This is true.
I think he actually has done that with Doge a few times.
I think he has, which makes it all the more funny that you have the Department of Government Efficiency, which is Doge. You know.
Yeah, literally.
So next up. So, are you seeing any signs of weakness or desperation in campaigns?
I'm seeing frustration, not weakness and desperation. I think it's frustration on the Harris camp that whoever is advising her is trying to reach men, but they don't. Maybe they're like the type of women that like hate men and don't know what men like or
Well, this
something.
is true.
Like, I can only theorize that. And it's like, can you just ask a normal housewife if you want to reach out to men? Or like ask a man, perhaps, that's not gay? No offense to
Or
gay dudes,
or
but like,
not that doesn't behave like a liberal man.
yeah,
I
like
mean,
it's
I hate
frustration
the
at their own ineptness. I don't think it's desperation because they still have that liberal swagger of we're the best, we're gonna win, right? But
yeah. Well, I'm going to throw out some. For example, I think the Trump is literally Hitler thing. That is desperation. What they're trying does not appear to be working, so they are reverting to you know everything they've done you know, for the last campaign, thinking that can somehow, help them. The other thing that I have seen is Harris has actually pulled out of North Carolina entirely. She's removed all of her planned ad buys and is moving everything up to Pennsylvania, which tells me that her internal polling says that North Carolina is not as close as some of the polls seem to believe it is.
you know what's very surprising to me? This is just tangentially related to the Hitler comments.
Yeah.
Is that in the midst of all of the Palestine stuff, right? AI translated Hitler speeches were already trending, And now you're just making more people search for Hitler? So it seems
Yeah,
like they want another Hitler.
yeah. Uh, I think there's also some desperation in the Harris campaign to try and, say, "Oh, I've changed my mind. I don't believe the same things I believed in 2020." Can't remember who did the interview, but you have an interview where Harris is saying, "Trump wants to take away the Second Amendment. I'm the pro gun rights candidate."
That's just gaslighting.
Like there is so much gaslighting, but it's awful. It's an awful visual. She has many, many people. There are many Democrats who are very, very anti-gun. Enough so that the Democratic Party is largely the party of, you know, that is pro-gun restriction. This is not a good look. Like it's like, well, what do you stand for? If the people that are the people that vote for you are now confused about what exactly you stand for. If you're saying stuff like this, if like there is just so much insanity. I mean, if you want to talk about an act of desperation, the Harris campaign's attempt to manufacture an October surprise with the lady who said Trump sexually assaulted her, that's desperation. There's no other way to describe it. Have you followed that one at all?
I mean, I saw how quickly it was disproven, but other than that, no, I just don't really give a bother.
So basically, you had a woman who is a lifelong Democratic activist claim that Jeffrey Epstein took her over to Trump's place and Trump groped her. And then he sent her a postcard after the fact. And the whole story fell apart because she cited Epstein's house in New York with the house. He didn't even own a place in New York at the time. So he didn't have a house there. Uh, then she cited Trump sending her a postcard and she showed the postcard, but people's signatures change over time. And this postcard certainly had Trump's signature, but it is Trump's signature from like current times instead of what his signature was in the 90s, in the early 90s. Like basically the whole story fell apart. And so while, manufacturing bullshit about your political rivals is a, tried and true tradition, something that very much, you know, it's a lot of fun. But at the same point, you got to actually put some effort into it. And it's like they're just throwing whatever shit they can out to see if anything will stick. You have had and you've had a lot of similar stories recently. You had for example, the Puerto Rican thing. Sure, that's one thing. But, I mean, even Jon Stewart came out and he's like, this guy's a fucking comedian. And you're running with it as if it's just Trump's rhetoric. And even media organizations were saying that Trump had said this, which is false. Um, you now have a couple that actually yesterday, I believe, they were saying that Trump had said that he wanted to put Liz Cheney in a firing squad. Whenever what he had actually said was, you know, maybe, if Liz Cheney went to war and had a bunch of guns pointing at her, she would, quit wanting us to go to war. Things like that, where it's just obvious misinterpretations. You know,
Yeah, I mean, nothing new then.
it's nothing new, but they're starting to become so obvious that it's not really working anymore for the mainstream media. And I think that's a moment of desperation for Harris as well. But yeah, on the Republican side, I'm seeing desperation, but not really in the presidential race. You got a few down ballot Republicans that are trailing Trump. He's overperforming down ballot candidates in polls. but that's to be expected, I think, this cycle, just because Kamala is not a terribly popular figure amongst certain demographics. So, are you ready to get to polling, Colton?
Let's do it.
All right. So, we'll just review. First off, we're going to start with the states that everybody is calling swing states. Then there are a few questions. Then there are a few states that I keep seeing questions asked about, and we're going to look at some of those too. The first state we're going to look at is Arizona. Trump is currently up in the polls by 6. In 2016, he overperformed in Arizona by half a point. In 2020, he underperformed by just under 1 point. And right now, the average poll for Trump has him up by 2.6, but the most reliable pollster over the last 4 years, Atlas Intel, has him up by 6. So, do you think that one's fairly safe Trump at this point? And I'll also add in that for early vote turnout, Republicans are at damn near 100% of the maximum early turnout vote they have had in Arizona. They're at like 97% of it.
Well, I'm not sure if I believe in the early voting hype just because Republicans now are being told it's okay to go vote in person early. I'm not sure if I believe it. I don't know how much of it is cannibalizing the day of vote versus how much of it, is new voters. I do not know that. And all of the polling that I've seen or heard from it, whether it's new voters or anything like that, I don't really view it as very credible. So at the moment, I'm kind of flip flopped on like whether it's good or not. Like if the one thing that I think is good about it is that in the West Coast states like Nevada and Arizona, where there's been a lot of the early voting, is that maybe we'll actually have an election result within a day or two rather than a week out.
Yes. The one thing I do want to point out is that this is damn near 100% of their maximum early vote. Even whenever they have had this number in the past, Arizona Republicans outperform Democrats on election day. That make a bit more sense?
Yeah, it doesn't really change my opinion. I have to see how much of it is staying around. You know what I mean?
Yep. Obviously, we don't know anything until election day, but still. Next up is Georgia. Uh, right now, the average is Trump plus 2. Atlas Intel, who are using as their most reliable, has Trump at plus 2. In 2016, Trump underperformed in Georgia by 0.3 of a vote, and in 2020, he underperformed by. Oh, excuse me, they underestimated Trump by 0.3 of a vote, 0.3%, and in 2020 they underestimated him by 0.1%. So it seems that Georgia typically very, very narrowly underpredicts Trump to the point where it's kind of irrelevant. And Georgia polling is historically really, really accurate. Like, it's just one of those states that is very good for polling for some reason. So the polls there tend to be fairly reliable. So I view that one as good quality and probably reliable. What are your thoughts, Colton?
Well, I'll just go with what the polls are saying then, because I don't have any relationship with Georgia, like any professional experience, so it's not really in my wheelhouse to, you know, say one way or the other. I'll just go with the polls on that, and then obviously the results.
All right. Next up, we have Nevada. And I know you've got thoughts on Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2016, while Trump lost Nevada, he overperformed by about 4.5 points. In 2020, he under he excuse me, they overestimated Trump by about 4 points in Nevada in 2016. They underestimated Trump by 1.2 points in Nevada in 2020. And right now, the average for Trump in Nevada across the polls is Trump plus one. However, reverting back to give the most reliable pollster, again, Atlas Intel, has Trump at plus six. So, what are your thoughts?
I think that's, I wouldn't say a +6. I would think like a +3 is probably where I would sit after, talking to people and family, friends, seeing people out in the public, neighborhood, signs and whatnot. I think a +3 is more accurate.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a plus six. From experience, I can say that in a lot of elections, Nevada has a knack of overpolling Republicans. But Nevada is also, just because of Las Vegas, it's a very transient state. So people come and go a lot. And so I do think it might be overpolled on the Republicans, but it looks surprisingly promising for Trump. Even the culinary union, is that what it is? The servers union?
Yeah,
What's it called?
culinary.
Culinary union has said that, yeah, we're endorsing Kamala, but our people are, we voted for Trump. So, you know, there's some writing on the wall that Trump could flip that one. But which, in the case of all the states we're covering in this initial section, that's the only one he has not won before. So next up is North Carolina. The In 2016, they underestimated Trump by 1.8, and in 2020, they underestimated him by one. And so right now, the average for Trump is he's up by 1.5 points, and the most reliable pollster has him up
By what?
by four. And I'd say pairing that with the fact that Kamala has pulled funding out of ads in North Carolina tells me that North Carolina looks very, very good for Trump, as good as it can look. What do you think?
Well, I would go more with the campaign actions and the polls themselves. So I'm going to trust that her pulling out is probably a good sign that Trump has this one in the bag.
Yeah. As Trump won North Carolina in 2020, he won it in 2016. It's it's generally been trending Republican. At at this point, it now has a Republican supermajority in the state house. It The only Democratic official in the state of North Carolina is the governor, who literally can't do anything because he just gets outvoted by, the Republicans. So they just override his vetoes. Next up is Michigan. In 2016, they under predicted Trump by 5.3 points. And in 2020, they under predicted Trump by 2.3 points. Right now, they have Harris up by zero point 0.8, 0.8 of a point. And but the most reliable pollster has Trump at plus two. I don't know about you, but I'm inclined to believe the plus two.
I don't know about a +2. I think it's a lot closer to 50-50, but I think a lot of the outreach that he's been doing there has largely been effective rather than ineffective. And I would say that what was it? He was recently doing an event with a large amount, like with like Muslim leaders there, right?
Yes.
I think he's going to surprise a lot of people by, I'm not going to say he outright wins Muslims, but I'm going to say he comes damn near close to it.
Current polling indicates he will carry 54% of Muslims.
I would, if that was true, I'd be very, very surprised.
Furthermore, he has received the endorsement of numerous Islamic leaders. And what's her name? Rep Tayyib. She has refused to endorse Harris. So yeah, the Muslim community, not a who would have thought that people from an a background of religious fundamentalism weren't huge fans of a lot of the the socially liberal stuff the Democrats stand for, as well as you know helping Israel. Just saying. Thoughts?
Yeah, I suppose if you're gonna have to pick one poison, I think it would rather be the stuff that doesn't affect their kids living in the U.S. while they can sort of, swallow with a bad taste the Israel stuff because both parties are for Israel.
By and large. But one of the things that has been said by several of the Islamic people is that by and large, unlike most presidents in the past, Trump didn't, just randomly bomb the Middle East. So I suppose that's a point for him in the eyes of a lot of people from that region. I mean, say what you will, love Obama or hate him, but he does have the record for child killed by bombings at his order as a Nobel Prize winner,
I
a
mean,
Nobel Peace Prize winner.
yeah, and I think his Xbox gamer tag would be Drone Master 44.
It would be. So next up is Wisconsin, and my God, Colton. So in 2016, they underestimated Trump by 6.2 points. In 2020, they underestimated him by 6. Right now, the average has him up by 1. Well, excuse me, the average has Harris up by zero point 0.3 points. I have to ask, Colton, do you think that Trump is going to carry Wisconsin?
I think if it's that close and with the historic underpolling, then I would bet money on it, but I wouldn't be 100% certain in my mind, just because I can't tell with this election.
Now, next up, I'm going to cite that Atlas Intel has him up by
By only what?
the Atlas Intel only has him at +1 in the state.
Hmm.
Now, I'm going to throw in a little bit here. Wisconsin is one of those states where it's notoriously hard to poll, and by and large, you know, Trump has a history of overperforming there. Furthermore, between Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, Wisconsin is the more Republican friendly state, which even with Atlas Intel stuff, I have trouble. I believe they are all under predicting Trump there. I do believe they're under predicting him just because everybody has a track record of under predicting Trump in Wisconsin. So, you know, I I'll also throw this out. I have heard a lot through the grapevine on this one, but Republicans and Democrats would both be shocked. People that work in the industry would both be shocked if Kamala somehow pulled out a win in Wisconsin. So I've kind of got to agree with the people that are actually working in the state. So yeah, I think he's going to win it despite the average polling.
Hmm.
All right. So next up, the next group of states we're going to be talking about is basically the swing states that nobody really wants to discuss anymore, like New Hampshire, the ones that are close enough to possibly be contested, and the states that, if you look on a map, they're the light blue ones. Right. So the first of the states that we're going to be looking at in this is New Hampshire. And New Hampshire's been a bit weird. Some recent polling has showed that Harris is only leading New Hampshire by one. And in 2016, they underpredicted Trump by a little over 3%. And in 2020, they were spot on. Right now, the average has Harris up by 3.5. And of note, um, the most reliable pollster in this, based on records and how accurate they've been in elections recently, would be Rasmussen. And while Rasmussen is widely viewed as veering to the right, most pollsters have underpredicted Republicans in recent years. So even if they do skew Republican, they're generally closer to the final number, which is why they were chosen. But Rasmussen has Harris leading the state by only 1 point. And additionally, we have seen Trump actually make a stop in New Hampshire in the last couple days. So, Colton, in this, what comes to mind is that the polls were right in 2020, but they weren't right in 2016. And I think personally the discrepancy there came in with just how unpopular Hillary Clinton was. She uh, she had a lot of negatives. And my question is this: do you believe that Harris is unpopular enough to where, or has turned off enough people with her rhetoric, with anything, or reduced morale amongst Democrats enough that it might swing that state enough to go to Trump?
That was a very loaded question. Thank you for that.
Well,
And
no, no, no.
I'm
I'm
gonna.
not saying it to be loaded. I'm just like providing. I'm just providing the insight I recall from 26 because that was significant. It was off by 3.5 points.
I'm
So
gonna
we've
say the
seen that it
polling's
can be
probably right.
off.
I'm gonna say it's probably still gonna go Harris.
I actually agree with that one. I think that she will carry New Hampshire. I think that it's. I think New Hampshire is just not a state Trump can win. If he wins it, I think it is because Democrats just don't go vote, which I do think is a possibility. Uh, but I don't think there are enough Trump Republicans in New Hampshire. I think like your class, I think that's one of those areas where I mean that was a state where Nikki Haley was successful. A lot of admittedly a lot of those Democrats were so anti-Trump that they registered Republican to go and vote against Trump in a primary. So, yeah, I don't think there's going to be any really breaking the spirits of the New Hampshire Democrats enough to get them to falter there. So I do expect Trump to lose New Hampshire. The next one is New Mexico. And this one is shown from time to time. It's discussed from time to time in some sources, but not talked about much. It's not broadly considered as being in play. That being said, in 2016, they overestimated Trump by 3 points. In 2020, they underestimated Trump by 2 points. Right now, the average has Harris up by 6.7. And again, Rasmussen, for the most reliable pollster in this, they have Harris up by +5. Now, New Mexico is a state which has a lot of Hispanics. and Trump has made up a lot of ground with Hispanics. Uh, it also has a lot of the same situations as Arizona, which is once more veering to the right, and Nevada, which is also veering to the right, where you have people of, more right leaning moving in from other states such as California. So, Colton, do you think that New Mexico? I mean, you're from, so you at least have you noticed any shifting? You know, other than Hispanics, I guess primarily Hispanics. Do you think that the Hispanic shift is actually going to be enough to cover like a 5 point deficit in New Mexico?
Not at all.
Not at all.
No.
I'm going to say I think New Mexico is probably more likely than New Hampshire, just because I don't think that gap is something that can be covered uh, by that portion of the population. I think that a lot of the Hispanics who would vote Trump will quite possibly just sit out the race instead of voting in that area, just because, kind of a
Hmm.
stigma against voting Republican. So I don't see New Mexico flipping. I have heard from Republicans who have worked in the state that they expect it to be better, but I don't see it flipping. So that's the second of the four swing states that nobody talks about. The next one is certainly an interesting one, and that is Minnesota. In 2016, they underpredicted Trump in the state by 4.3 points. In 2020, they underpredicted Trump by 2.1 points. In right now, as things stand, the polling average in Minnesota has Harris up by 4.8. And Rasmussen, who is usually the closest to right of the ones who have actually bothered polling Minnesota, has Harris at +3. So this is an interesting one, Cole. This one's interesting.
Is it?
This one's very interesting, in fact, because I think there are some polling problems in Minnesota. First off, it has the largest Islamic population of any state in the nation, so that could come into play. And if those polls are right, that's a big shift. It's not a huge number, but it's enough to shift things a few points. It's also a state where Trump has historically overperformed significantly. I mean, again, he overperformed in 2016 by over 4 points. He overperformed in 2016 by 4 points. He overperformed in 2020 by 2 points, and in 2020 you had the advantage of a Biden at the top of the ticket who had he was running as Scranton Joe, if you will. So he had ties to those, blue collar, workers. And this year, we have seen through internal polling from the Teamsters that better than 60% of Teamsters and labor unions members are supporting the Donald. So that's a big deal. You have the Islamic population basically in revolt of the Democratic Party. You have black men in, you know, sort of a state of revolt against the Democratic Party. And to a lesser extent, Hispanics that are there, those are in revolt. So can it be flipped?
Not in my opinion. I'd be surprised. I'd be very
I
surprised.
hmm, with the error of only three. Well, with not the error, but the current polling having Harris up by 4.8, and Rasmussen having her at +3. Rasmussen is not as historically reliable as Atlas Intel, though their polling has matched in a lot of the states where Atlas Intel does have polling. So I don't know. I have, again, I've heard of people that are, doing work in Minnesota. On the Republican side, they're they've essentially indicated they have the largest ground game in
Can you repeat that?
Minnesota. The Republicans have supposedly the largest ground game field operations campaign that they have in any state in the nation. It is very well funded. The Minnesota Republican Party has supposedly gotten their head out of their ass and taken a book out of, the North Carolina Party and the Virginia Party. So I'm going to say it's possible. I'm going to say that it's possible that it flips, but I think it's a coin toss. That's my thought. And I think it's a slightly weighted coin toss to Kamala's advantage because of Tim Walz. But I do think the sort of working class rebellion, as it were, will make that much closer. Would you at least agree it's going to be closer than 4 points or closer than
Yeah,
5 points?
closer than 5, definitely.
Because they currently have it polled at 4.8. I think that Trump will make up some of that gap. I don't know if he will cover that gap, but I think that Minnesota will probably be too close to call for a while. And I am not a pollster. I would not recommend necessarily taking bets on this one. But if you did want to, delve into election betting and bet in something that had the, chance of making you a good bit of money, I'd say that for rate of return to risk, Minnesota would be a good bet. I hope that explained it. That's a word now. Adding ed to it. But I hope that explained it well enough, Colton. Do you think that sufficed?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. And lastly, one that is sort of near and dear to me is Virginia. In 2016, they over predicted Trump by about half a point. In 2020, they under predicted Trump by, they underestimated Trump by 2 points. Right now, polling indicates that Harris is up by 5.8. And it is important to note in Virginia, especially, that there are a ton there's not a ton of polling, only 5 or 6, and three of them are very, very liberal skewing polls. And some of these polls are a good bit older. The most reliable one, the most reliable recent one has Harris at +2. And even when Harris was surging, uh, the University of Mary Washington, who is also fairly reliable within the state, also has Harris at only +2, and that was in September when she was surging. Now, to preface some situations in Virginia, you do have a Republican governor. You have a fairly popular Republican governor at that. It is a state where in their they have their gubernatorial races in off years. It is a state where in that election, Republicans swept basically every statewide seat. Those individuals are endorsing Trump. You have while Trump has actually he's actively campaigning there. Even he had a campaign rally outside of Richmond a few days ago, and this is also a state where a lot of the liberal vote comes in the form of black people, who, at least the men, tend to be skewing more Republican. or either not voting or toward Republican. Early voting in Virginia is displaying a rather unenthusiastic turnout for Democrats, and in particular amongst African Americans. That same thing is also playing out in Georgia. The question is, do you think that Trump can cover in all likelihood, okay, first off, which do you think is more likely, that Trump is down 6 points in Virginia or that he is down two?
6.
You think he's closer to six?
Yeah.
What's your reasoning? Just curious.
I think all of the like the suburbs of DC, they show up and they vote all the time. They probably don't get polled. I mean,
Uh, the, su- the suburbs of DC, if they're getting any Democrats in, if they're getting Democrats in Virginia, they're basically polling that area.
I don't know. I think
But
DC is not DC. I think Virginia is very Democrat. I don't think it's going to be flipped.
I still remember when it was very reliably Republican. It's only been Democrat since Obama. But that being said, I think of any state is likely to flip, it would likely be, if any state amongst these four that we have just covered now is likely to flip, it is likely to be Virginia. And the reason being there, that you have a Republican Party that is like a well-oiled machine. Uh, you know how DeSantis completely revamped the Florida Republican Party?
Hmm.
Glenn Youngkin has done that in Virginia. And they are actually functioning, which is more than I can say about a lot of them. So I think it is possible, because there is limited polling in Virginia, that we just don't have enough of a sample. I mean, for example, there were 5 polls, and the oldest of those polls that's still active, and the oldest one of those is in early September. So we don't have a great visual of Virginia at the moment. So some of these polls were also taken when Harris was surging before, you had the Trump boost at the end. So I'm not sure how much it's actually off by. I'm I would say it's probably not, 5.8. I'd say it's lower than that. I don't know if it's only 2, but given that in the last 4 years we have seen that a Republican can win Virginia, and we've also again seen some unenthusiastic turnout numbers in early voting, which is where Democrats usually build up their advantage before election day. I think that I don't. Oh my God, I'm always reluctant to say shit like this, but I think there's a good chance that that one could be. I don't want to give a percentage. I'd say it's like a slightly weighted coin flip to the advantage of Trump, just given the information that we have. Of course, I can be proven wrong like anybody, but that one seems startlingly close. Startlingly close.
I think it's closer to Nevada, where for a federal election, people are going to show up. Where for the longest time, it was blue at federal, but red and local.
Yes. Uh, I don't know. I honestly don't know. Virginia is just one where I can see it because it is historically Republican. Uh, what from the 60s up through the early 2000s, it was solid red. But yes, I think that one's going to largely be DC suburbs, uh, and I think it's going to be a case more of turnout from Republicans rather than anything Democratic on the Democratic side, just because the Republicans have picked up a lot of people who are low propensity voters. I think if they do a good job with voter turnout, Virginia is flippable. And I think right now, given the state of the GOP there, they're sort of in a best case scenario to actually win it with Trump as their candidate. I'll just leave it at that. That fair?
Sure.
Right. Next up, the four states that absolutely nobody is talking about except for one of them. And it's weird. Like these four states are just really, really goddamn weird. So the first state we're going to look at is Illinois because Illinois doesn't have any polling. Because, as it turns out, once a bunch of pollsters make asses of themselves by getting everything wrong for, like two election cycles, they kind of decide not to put their neck out there anymore and just randomly poll shit. So, Illinois, I have heard a lot of a lot of very optimistic takes on Illinois for Republicans. Colton, how delusional is that on a scale of 1 to 10? Just
You even
how
asking me
delusional?
this is wasting my time.
Yes. Like there is yes, Trump has gained ground amongst African Americans. Yes, Trump is, he has worked up a lot of, you know, he's gained a lot of ground amongst, white working class. In fact, he basically controls that ground now. That being said, I don't see a war. Chicago dominates that state. Chicago has not been a place where he has really bothered. Chicago, he would have had to do something to appeal to the voters there, anyhow. And maybe he could have. Maybe he should have. I don't know, but that seems like a waste of time to me. Uh, I mean, the guy's already been, shot at once and damn near shot at another time. Going to Chicago to just casually get shot again doesn't seem like a good plan. So, yeah, I don't see a snowball's chance in hell of Trump winning Illinois. That one is going to go Harris. That one would go. I don't know. You could probably run. I don't know. Frickin' Hitler Stalin ticket, and provided it had a D next to their name on the ballot, they would win Illinois. So I don't see that one as viable. So the next one up is New Jersey. And New Jersey is not really being polled heavily. The latest polling I can get from New Jersey was Rasmussen. And the last polling I can get from New Jersey was in September. And it had Harris at +9. And early voting is showing that Republicans are really overperforming there. Like Democrats are not matching their usual. It's not so much that they are reaching their peak numbers, but Democrats are just falling flat on their faces in the early vote. So, Colton, any chance of New Jersey?
Robert, if you're gonna continue like this, I don't even know why we're continuing. Th-
Well,
This is a
th-
pointless. This is a pointless endeavor.
this is the last one where it's, like people just ask about it, which is why we're touching on it.
You shouldn't entertain that dumb of a question. That encourages stupider questions.
It does. I will assure you, the last two, one of them is just comical, and the other one is actually not a terribly unreasonable question.
All right, well, just give me the next two states so I can tell you they're both dumb
Okay,
too.
suffice to say, New Jersey.
No.
That no,
Next.
Trump will narrow it, but it is not going to go for him. Next up, because of a, you know, well, a couple days ago, a poll was released that showed Kamala Harris winning this Iowa by like 3 or 4. And Colton, Trump has carried Iowa both times that he has run. by damn near 10 points.
I again, you shouldn't be entertaining this.
Well,
This
well,
isn't even funny. This is
here
someone's
is
delusions, and you're not humoring them.
here is the reason why it's significant. The Des Moines Register poll is the one who released that, and the Des Moines Register poll is the most reliable poll in Iowa. But my thoughts are that not all of them can be winners.
Robert,
Yeah.
you cut out.
Oh, what I'm saying is that not every poll is a winner, and this one seems very much like an outlier. Would you agree?
Yeah,
But for whatever reason, people online have latched onto it saying Kamala's going to win. I don't see that one happening. It is Hillary couldn't do it, Biden couldn't do it, and Kamala is not as a candidate as good as either of them. Like as far as going out and speaking and really winning people over.
Robert, you're phrasing
So
this wrong.
what?
It's not that Hillary or Biden or Kamala are candidates. They're a stand-in for being not Trump.
They are a stand-in for being not Trump. Uh, yeah, kind of. Well, Hillary was more of a candidate. Biden was more of a stand-in for not Trump. Hillary was actually trying to run on her merits. Biden ran on not being Trump. But anyway, no. Iowa, that's going to be Republican. Almost definitely. Be a very, very cold day in hell and Iowa for that happens. And the last one is really the interesting one, man. The last one is the state of Maine. We don't have good polling in Maine at all. At all. And we had some polling before the candidate switch, before the Democratic Party decided they wanted to protect democracy so hard that they ousted their democratically elected nominee and replaced him with Kamala Harris. You know, that time.
Hmm.
And there was a while during that where the state of Maine was going Trump as a whole, Maine at large. Trump is almost guaranteed to win one of the congressional districts, which is one electoral vote. Maine is one of the states that splits them. And, well, so you have a background where he was showing him winning against Biden. You don't have good polling now. Most of the bad polling that you do see has Harris up substantially because the population center is in Portland, and Portland is filled with people from Massachusetts, which, if you've spent any time in Maine, the appropriate name for those people is massholes. But still, do you think that, well, obviously Kamala Harris has more appeal than Joe Biden. Kamala Harris can sometimes put together a coherent sentence, which is more than I can say for Joe. But do you think Maine at large is actually going to be at play? I mean, this is just
No.
no, yeah. I don't think Maine at large. The more I've looked into it, the more I think that Maine is getting a bit redder under Trump. I mean, several of the elected officials that are up for re-election there are highlighting how much they agree with Trump in their election ads. You do see that, but I don't think that it's going to be sufficient to fully flip the state. I think if Trump is going to flip anything, it would be Virginia and possibly Minnesota. And I guess you could throw New Hampshire in, but Iowa is still going to go Trump. Illinois is still going to go Democrat. New Hampshire's probably still Democrat. New Mexico, I don't see that difference being made up. Minnesota, Virginia, and New Hampshire are probably the closest, but I don't know. I think I of those, I'd say Virginia is probably the most likely. So, Colton, closing thoughts.
Go vote.
Go vote. I've got one final thought in this, and it's something I never thought I'd say. Historically, and I think it is something of a paradigm shift. Historically, Democrats have been able to win by, targeting. Well, Republicans, whenever they've won, they have won by very specifically targeting Republican voters to get them to go out and vote. Right now, as it stands, at least in a lot of these swing states, Republicans are in a position where they can win just by voter turnout. The metrics are in their favor to win if people turn out and vote, which I think that can be said of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, especially. And that is a much better place to be in than having to, do all the back end data work to model people. So I view that as just speaking in industry, I view that as something that, you know, where the Republicans are stepping into a much more friendly position than they have been for the last 20 years. Whereas the Democrats, who don't really have much experience at targeting, at least not currently, are about to step into a world in some of these states in electioneering where they're not that comfortable, where they don't have that much experience in recent times. And I think at an industrial level, within the industry of, well, political industry, that's going to be something where in the coming years that I think our industry is about to evolve. And I think it's going to largely depend on not on Trump and not us, but on the candidates that follow. And I'm genuinely curious to see how that plays out. What do you think?
Um, I don't know. We'll have to see when it's not Trump running.
We will. I think it largely comes down to whether they replace Trump with another populist or they try to go back to a Bush. That's my thought. But anyway, to you poor bastards still listening, thank you for doing so. We hope you learned something today. And we hope that your time since the last of our videos has involved a lot more sleep than we've gotten. So thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, please like and subscribe. And we look forward to hopefully entertaining you in our next video. Thank you, and everyone have a good day.
Have a good one.